I'm hanging on.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is 3:07. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Stephanie, would you mind doing roll call?
Nicole Banks,
I'm present.
Melissa Bacon,
Here.
Tamar Ennis,
Present.
Christy Gonzalez,
Present.
Meredith Jordan,
Present.
Eric Taylor,
Here.
Renata Washington,
Here.
Vivian Webb, here, and Phil Wilson.
Here.
And you have 9 present, so you have a quorum.
What? Go for it, y'all.
Got 'em all.
We're on a roll today. Thank you, Stephanie. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone of a few rules. For committee members and members of the public attending in person, please raise your hand to speak and wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking. I forgot to say, I'm in Renata's spot, this for today. To help the meeting run smoothly, please keep side conversations to a minimum and comments related to the topic we are discussing. For those committee members who are attending virtually, remember you must be on camera and have your first and last name showing to be counted toward our quorum. Please keep microphones muted unless called upon by the chair. Electronically raise your hand to request to speak and wait to be called on by the chair. For attendees, electronically raise your hand to request to speak. Once recognized by the chair, your microphone will be turned on. After speaking, the microphone will be returned to mute. Also, the question and answer and chat is to only be used by those needing an ADA accommodation to participate in the meeting. Public comment will not be accepted via the Q&A and chat except for those individuals who requested the accommodation. As for order, committee members in person and virtually will be allowed to speak first. Public members in person will then be called upon, followed by public participating virtually who have their hands raised. Comments in the Q&A and chat will be addressed last. As with hybrid meetings, it can be difficult to keep track of all those wanting to speak in person and virtually. Please be patient. All comments and questions from committee members and the public may be limited to 3 minutes or less should we run into time constraints, so please keep that in mind. Also, comments about a person's character will not be allowed. Finally, members of the public will have the opportunity to provide public comment before each vote and during designated public comment periods. The chair may also use their discretion to determine if comments will be accepted outside of those times. Now we're going to go over our April meeting summary. Everyone should have reviewed the April meeting summary, which is linked in the agenda. You should have received via email. There's also a copy in your committee packet. I need a motion to accept the minutes.
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
Nicole seconds, thank you. Due to the new regulations on open meeting laws, we will need to do a roll call vote. Stephanie, can you please take the roll?
Yes. Ms. Banks.
Yay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me start over. A yay is to accept, a nay is to not accept. So Ms. Banks.
Yay.
Ms. Banks, yay. Ms. Bayham.
Yay.
Bayham, yay. Ms. Washington.
Yay.
Washington, yay. Ms. Webb.
Yay.
Webb, yay. Dr. Wilson.
Yay.
Yay. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah.
Mr. Taylor, yay. Ms. Jordan.
Yes.
Jordan, yes. And Mr. Ennis.
Yay.
So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 yeses, no. All right, 0.
All right, so the April meeting summary has passed by unanimous consent. Now we will go on to Louisiana Rehabilitative Services update. Ms. Melissa Bam.
Good afternoon, everyone. To start with my updates, I want to let you all know that the state plan, which is essentially our application for federal funding has been provisionally approved. The reason why it was only provisionally approved is because currently we do not have enough people on our council. We are required by law to have an advisory council, and long story short, with the change in administration things, we don't have enough people. But we are working with boards and commissions to get the appointments so that we can come into compliance. With our pre-employment transition services program, we are currently in the planning stages for not the next school year, but the school year after that. Because this school year coming up it's already already upon us.
It would be 26, 27.
So we're in
25,
24,
26.
so 25, 26.
It's 25, 26. Okay.
We continue to gain interest in new school districts for third-party cooperative arrangements. Those are the arrangements in which we have contracts with the school districts, and they put up the state match, and they have their own transition specialists to perform the pre-employment transition services. We recently completed a contract with Caldwell Parish, and we are currently in the contract process with Morehouse School Board and Inspire NOLA. In terms of planning for the 25-26 school year, we are more than likely going to have a reapplication process for our vendors. It's very important. Right now we have 31 pre-ETS vendors, and it's just very important that we ensure that the quality of services is where we want it to be. We're going to be looking at some curriculums. We don't feel that the services are consistent enough statewide. So we're going to really be looking at our vendors to make sure that we have the right vendors in place who have the qualifications necessary to provide those services the way that we need those services provided. So we are definitely looking at ways to do that. So that's my update on pre-employment transition services. In terms of other collaborative efforts, we are currently working with the Office of Behavioral Health to develop a better referral form and process to ensure seamless delivery of services for individuals in the mental health system who need vocational rehabilitation services. The Office of Workforce Development, which is the office in which LRS is located in, the administrators of our office recently met with staff with the Department of Children and Family Services to learn more about their programs. The Workforce Commission will continue to work with DCFS and other partners to establish a better system for individuals who need employment and other support services. So there is a lot of things going on at the Workforce Commission. There's a lot of groups going on. It's very important to the governor that we have a more seamless service delivery system for employment, and that employment system allows people to get the support needs that they need. And I know when I was with DCFS, back when we were with them, when LRS was with them, I think they called it No Wrong Door. It's the same concept where if you go into a one-stop or you go into an office, a public office, that you'll get the services that you need. So we're really looking at processes. What is the LRS process? What are the application process for all these different programs to figure out how to integrate them? It's a complicated task, but we've got some good people working on that. So hopefully we can get a better system in place so that, and we talk about this a lot in this on this board, just with the delivery system for individuals with developmental disabilities. Same concept with employment and support services. It's very difficult sometimes to kind of know everything that's out there of what you need. And so we're really working hard to make sure that everyone has the resources available to them. So in terms of the administration of LRS, we have made a number of changes in an effort to free our field staff from administrative functions so that more time can be spent with our customers. The unfortunate reality is that we don't have as many staff as we used to in LRS. And so we're trying to be very cognizant of that and be very intentional about what changes we can make in order to make our processes more efficient. And it's very important to me that our frontline workers, the workers who work in our regional office, have the time that they need to serve participants. And so one major change that we recently made was that invoice processing is now done at state office. Counselors still have to look at the invoices to make sure that it's the service that their client received. But in terms of processing those invoices and things of that nature, those are now being paid by my staff at state office. All new vendor applications and renewals are also being handled initially by state office staff that used to start at the regional office, and they gather the documentation and send it to state office and validate it. So now we have taken on the role of validating that information beforehand to take that off of our field staff. Additionally, one other thing that we're changing in most regions, we have a position called a rehabilitation counselor associate. These are paraprofessionals that are supposed to help rehab counselors to manage their caseloads. And they were the ones primarily doing the bill paying. And we've transitioned them into a more primary role in coordinating pre-employment transition services in school districts. Pre-employment transition services, or pre-EDS, is a vital program. It's one of my favorite programs, if I'm going to be honest with you. But the fact of the matter is, with less staff, the amount of time it takes to coordinate services in all the school districts in Louisiana, it's been unmanageable. So we're hoping with taking the payment of invoices from the rehab counselor associates and having them more involved in pre-employment transition services so that the rehab counselors can work with the vocational rehabilitation clients will help us to be better, and that LRS services can be of a higher quality. So those are my updates for now. If y'all have any questions, we have a lot going on.
Any questions for Melissa? All right. Next on the agenda is an update from the Louisiana Department of Education. The Special Education Monitoring Audit was released in May. Ms. Meredith Jordan with the LDOE is here to provide an update on an audit, legislative updates, and other LDOE updates. Ms. Meredith?
Good afternoon. First, let me apologize. I like to come to these meetings in person, but I'm actually in St. Charles Bridge, coming to you guys from a training. So I also know that the weather here is really bad outside. I can tell that my internet is going out, so I apologize.
No, just one second. Yeah. So go to the next one.
Sorry. Am I back?
Yes.
So I can tell my internet's going in and out. So let me start with the legislative audit. I want to talk about that a little bit. I know many of you guys came to Bessie. We had that on as a Bessie item in June. And the director of monitoring and I kind of went through the audit results with Bessie, what our responses were. I am going to be bringing a more detailed response timeline to STEEP on July 31st. And we will also be bringing, in response to some of those recommendations, an update to our monitoring policy, both to SEEP and then to Bessie in August. So we'll have two responsive items. First is that timeline. What are the steps that we're taking in response? And second is codifying some of those recommendations into policy pretty quickly for August Bessie. So just to kind of give you guys a little bit more, our team and our monitoring team attended a national monitoring policy writing workshop in June. I believe we were in Virginia. Yeah. And so, no, I'm sorry, we were in Colorado. And one of the things that we did was we asked this national OSIP-funded Technical Assistance Center to review our current monitoring policy and give us feedback. So what you will see is in our bulletin update, we'll have some clarifying updates as well from that feedback and to kind of bring us up to that federal expectation of all of the clarity that we really need. One of the biggest takeaways for us from the audit was that, and we hear this from stakeholders, is to have more boots on the ground monitoring in our school systems. And so, as you all may or may not know, we had 6 full-time special education monitors on staff. We also, during the process of this audit, requested from the legislature additional positions so that we could build our capacity and do more on-site monitoring. And we were awarded 6 positions. So those new special education monitoring positions, those job postings will be posted through civil service, if not by now, by the end of the month. And that is going to allow us to hold to some of those recommendations that really came out of the audit around trying to increase the number of on-site visits that we do. And so that was something that we committed to throughout the audit, and we're actually going to codify into policy. And this measurable timeline actually just came down from OSIP very recently in written guidance. So IDEA doesn't say you have to go out and monitor X number or X percent of school systems. But what OSIP came out in guidance, maybe a year, maybe less than a year ago, was they said that once every 6 years, that you should provide monitoring activities to every LEA. And so we are going to codify and put that into policy as well, because though it's not in law, we know that is an expectation. And we talked about that a lot through this audit process with the auditors. So that was not a surprise recommendation that came out of that. And so just wanted to kind of provide you guys that sort of high level overview and some of our responses. Like I said, we're going to have an additional response timeline that we will bring to SEEP in a couple of weeks, that updated policy, and then we'll have that and bring that to Bessie in August. And so if you guys want to pause and we want to talk about the audit, that's fine, or I can go through and also talk about legislation as well. However you want to address that, Madam Chair.
Anybody has any questions about the audit?
What was the audit about?
Ms. Jordan? He was asking what was the audit in reference to?
It was about, you said it was about.
The SPED monitoring, that manager.
This particular audit focused in on our risk-based monitoring activities. So when our monitoring team conducts their risk analysis, they will rank school system from low to high risk, and that is how they determine who gets what level of monitoring. And so our highest risk districts will receive on-site, boots on the ground monitoring for sure. And so the auditors really liked that process. We all do. But we really lacked capacity to do more. And that's really what came out of the audit, was for us to, the recommendation was for us to do more of the on-site monitoring. And so we had to get additional people and build staff capacity to be able to do that. And so that was the real focus of this particular report, was on our risk-based monitoring of our school system.
Oh, and Ms. Stephanie?
Hey Meredith, I'm sorry, I just had a quick question. For the 6 new positions, site monitoring, were there any
Mhm.
positions already there, or is this just like a new, like new? I don't know if I'm making sense. Like, were there people that did this previously and we're just adding
are.
6 new people?
Correct. We currently have 6. We are adding 6 additional, so we are doubling our
okay.
monitoring team, which is really exciting.
So it'll be 12 in all.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And you have to think, we have nearly 200 LEAs between all of our public schools and our charters. We have nearly 200 LEAs who receive some sort of monitoring each year.
No other questions, Ms. Shaw?
Okay, so let's move and talk to speak to our legislative updates. And I want to spend a bit of time here because, of course, these updates are going to impact our children. They're going to impact our families. So we did have a bit of a busy session for special education. And so in schools, we're going to be impacting 5 bulletin revisions in response to several different acts. And so I want to talk about that. And so that you guys are all aware. So we're going to bring all legislative responsive policy change to July SEEP. And then, of course, August Bessie. And we're going to impact Bulletin 741, which is around our handbook for school administrators. And then I'll tell you what specifically will be updated. Our complaint management procedures will be updated, Bulletin 1573. That's around complaint management. Our 1706, which is our main SPED bulletin, that one will be impacted. We'll have an update to Bulletin 135, which is our health and safety bulletin. And we'll also have a Bulletin 126, which is our charter school bulletin, because as you all know, sometimes these SPED updates, we also have to go and indicate in charter policy, hey, this also applies to you, charter school, you must do this. So let's talk specifically about the acts that I'm talking about and some of the updates that you all are going to expect to see. And if it would be helpful for you all, I think especially our Education Employment Committee, I would be willing to commit to also making sure I send you guys, I mean, these will be public materials when we post them for SEEP, but so you all can get this information too. I hope that you all join us at SEEP, but just in case, this one for sure, because it is so policy heavy, may be a good idea for me to send you guys these materials as well to DD Council whenever we post them. So we have Act 512, which I called the Parental Consent Bill. So this is the bill that addressed requiring parental consent for changes to the IEP. And so, of course, that is going to impact Bulletin 1706, right? Then we have Act 198, which I just called it a SPED bill because it actually does quite a few things and impacts 5 bulletins. So all 5 bulletins will be impacted by this Act 198. So this particular piece of legislation requires that school board members have specific training on special education, which goes into 1706. So we're updating that. This act also addressed some updates to behavioral health services in schools, and added that the department now accept complaints around behavioral health services in schools. And so that one is going to go in a couple of places, but very specifically in that health and safety in our health bulletin. So that one will impact Bulletin 135 is our health bulletin. So you'll see some changes around behavioral health services in schools, and parents will be allowed to file complaints around that. It also changed, this particular act changed the due process timeline to allow parents to request due process hearings for allegations up to 2 years prior to the date that they became aware or are filing that complaint. In the past, that was 1 year. So now parents have more time, up to 2 years, to file for due process. So that's huge. So like you guys, as you hear me talking about this, you can see and hear how this is impacting our families. And so we want to be really intentional. And of course, once this is codified into policy, we will be changing guidance for parents as well to make sure we're communicating. This particular act also added the 90-day timeline for SPED cameras and installation. So as you can see, that particular legislation does quite a few things all at once, and is going to impact quite a few bulletins. And the third particular act is Act 689, which I called the tutorship bill, if you remember that one, but it actually expanded a little bit and requires the department and LEAs to provide to certain families of students who have the most significant disabilities information about how student rights change as they reach 18, age of majority, and what types of information and decisions families may have to make. So that information will go into Bulletin 1706. So that's kind of the high level main updates around, and the charter school, the SEEK requirements. I know that was one that many of you were also instrumental in. So Act 198 also added very specific reporting requirements for local SPED advisory councils. So we're codifying that in policy, and we're also putting that into charter policy, because sometimes I find that charter schools aren't even aware sometimes of some of these specific laws and requirements that do apply to them. So we're going to make that very clear and also add it in the charter bulletin. So some of these things we see impacting several different bulletins, and we want to make sure that we're putting it and addressing it in all places, so that it's seen by the right administrators, both school system level administrators, charter administrators, and school administrators. So these policy updates are a key piece. I wanted to address legislative updates as quickly as possible, so that we can get them on the timeline and get these bulletins updated. So all of these updates, they're going to August Bessie, but they will all go on a period of notice of intent, where there is additional comment allowed. And so they don't actually become codified for several more months. So I wanted to do this as soon as possible after session ended with the next Bessie meeting. And as you all know, even though we're updating policy, there's additional work that my team, possibly our legal team and our monitoring team, will do in response in terms of creating additional guidance, communicating with families, updating for example, our procedural safeguards handbook with any new timelines for our families. So even though we're getting the policy work done, and it has been very cumbersome to make sure that we're getting all of these updates in the right policies and addressed correctly, there's even more work to do once we just update policy in terms of additional guidance that may be needed as well, or resources to be created to address some of these requirements. So I'll pause there and see if there are any specific questions about any of these legislative policies. Like I said, we're bringing quite a bit of draft policy to SEEP in the next couple of weeks, and I will ask them to review and hopefully get an endorsement for all of these changes to move forward, even though really they're in law now, so we're gonna have to do them. But I always like to get SEEP's input and their endorsement on any policy change.
Meredith, if, once Bessie approves everything, how long do the LDEs have to start, with this process? Because I know school's gonna already be in session, and, because we're starting earlier and earlier. Because I know we go back the first.
Yes.
some-
Usually, yeah. And I think this is pretty standard for legislation. Britton, Ebony, y'all could chime in too and tell me if you think different. Typically with legislation, they want you to implement new legislation within a year. So by that next legislative session, you better have addressed everything from the previous session to the best of your ability. So once we bring it to August, Bessie, however, Christy, if we get approval from Bessie, all of these policy changes will go on 90-day, I believe, 90-day, what they call notice of intent. So it's a good 3+ months before the policy ever gets actually changed and reposted and released on our policy website. So it does take time. However, one of the things that I like to do, so none of this will be a surprise for any of our special education directors. I have been watching these things with them throughout legislative session and prepping them for implementation. So this is one area of concern that I have, and I'll tell you why. So if you remember at SEEP, I believe at a previous SEEP meeting, just this past year, a couple of SEEP meetings ago, SEEP adopted a 15-day prior written notice timeline.
Yes.
That policy change is about to go in effect for this school year. However, one of the things Act 198 did was Act 198 changed prior written notice timeline to 10 days. So I am working through that challenge. So updated policy is about to say 15 days, but law says 10. So that I'm working through legal. Do you see how tricky that is? So I'm working with legal through that. My advice to school systems would be prep for 10-day notice. You know that is in law and you know we're about to change it. That will take time to change the actual wording of that policy from 15 to 10, but we know it's coming. That is the only piece in here that I feel like could get tricky when we talk about potential complaints and which timeline do I follow, 15 or 10, in this transition from what was just put into policy by SEEP versus what law now tells us we have to put in policy. See what I'm saying? So that one we're working through, and we will have to work through advising school systems. But I know if I were in a school system, I would start working toward the 10-day, right? Because you know it's coming.
All right.
And I will say this, the only legislation we are not addressing just yet is the dyslexia. We had 2 dyslexia pieces of legislation that will take more time to put into policy and to put into action.
All right, Vivian?
Were the members of SEEP and Bessie interviewed, or were they just selected and put on?
You're talking about our new seat.
And Bessie?
We did have, yeah. So we did some interviews, Vivian, did not interview. So we had over 100. And so our selection committee had process of also
I'm sorry,
conducted
you're like lagging
some
out.
interviews before they made their select. Sorry, say that one more time.
You were,
It was like
Fuzzy.
breaking up, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you just repeat that one more time, Meredith? Oh.
Not a good spot.
yeah.
That's what he did.
I've been working on the hotspot too.
Yeah.
I guess we can give her a minute, see if she's been going.
I ain't going nowhere. Hey.
Still
For a
have-
minute. Oh, she's trying. Yeah, you don't have that going on.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, great. I'm back. Okay, I didn't get all of Vivian's question.
Yeah, that's better. Could you repeat what you said previously, Meredith? We couldn't hear you.
Oh,
There was-
sure.
Question?
So our committee, Vivian, did have an application screening process, and then they did also conduct interviews. So not we had nearly 100 applicants, over 100 applicants. So they did not interview every who applied. And I think she had a follow-up.
What was the reasoning behind not interviewing everyone?
With 100 applicants, it would have taken, we had screen applicants first, just by the sheer amount of interested applicants. I know we would in everyone. There were a lot of qualified individuals who applied.
Any other questions?
I have a
Oh, Brittany.
question. It's not, I don't know if it's necessarily under the legislative stuff that you were talking about, but in I guess it was the last Bessie meeting, we were there to talk about the contracts with the FHF centers. And I'm curious, I know they received their allocations or will receive them for July and August. And just trying to follow up, or is that going to continue after that? Has there been any determination of where those contracts are going or not going in the future?
Yeah, so we actually met with all of them. We asked them to submit proposals to us, and we did have a couple, you all know, we had a couple of director changes, and so we got some of those proposals late that we haven't. I've got one that I've got to meet with, but we are making a decision, Britton, before our August Bessie. So we are going to bring allocations to August Bessie around that.
Gotcha. Do you know around when that's gonna happen, or just that hasn't been determined yet?
We will have that, let's see, probably in the next week or two. Yeah, they will know. We kind of told Families Helping Families that we would get with them by the end of July.
Okay,
Yep, to let them know either way.
gotcha. Thank you.
You got it.
Anything else, Meredith?
I think that's it for me. And then, of course, I'll have, I didn't want to sort of reiterate or go over anything I was going to say tomorrow on the report. But yeah, that was all pretty much that I had on my agenda for today, unless you guys have any other questions, concerns.
Not that anybody else? That's it. Thank you. Now we will move on to our contractual activities. Stephanie, will you update us on building capacity and education and employment?
Sure. The ARC had 2 in-person trainings this quarter, one in Region 2 and the other in Region 9. Region 2 had 22 people registered. there were, I believe, 8 in attendance. For Region 9, there were 7 people registered, but unfortunately, we think somebody may have taken the sign-in sheet, so I'm not sure how many people went. But we did have 7 people that were registered. And I do have like the, what am I trying to say? The evaluation data. So I can kind of use that as a gauge for how many people were there, but not everybody, fills them out or turns them in. So, I know that there were people there. There are 3 trainings that are currently scheduled for August. We have Region 1 and 3, Region 5, and a Region 4 training that are scheduled. And those will be posted on our website as well as the ARCs. And we've been posting those flyers on social media for everyone to attend. The trainings do include the one that I went to in person was at Region 2, and they had the Lighthouse Louisiana is a guest speaker there that talks about WIPA, so workforce, innovation, planning, and assistance. So they gave a presentation on that and different planning, benefits planning information. It was very interesting. I learned a lot. So if you haven't gone, you should check it out definitely, because I learned a lot while I was there, so.
Right. Thank you, Stephanie. Any questions for Stephanie before we move on? All right, hearing no additional questions, we will move on to announcements. Tomorrow is the full council meeting, which will begin promptly at 8:30. Does anyone on the committee have any announcements to make before tomorrow? None. Hearing none, if there are no objections, we can adjourn by unanimous consent. Any objections?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Public comment.
we have public comment?
I missed it all.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No public comment.
No public comment.
Right.
No hands raised.
I was like, oh, no.
No, sorry. That was my fault.
I said she must have deleted it.
I did by accident, sorry.
That's okay. No public comment, no announcements. If there's none and no objections, we can adjourn by unanimous consent. Any objections? I hereby adjourn the meeting at 3:49. Yay, early.
Yeah.